Hey, Geoff, welcome back to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Yeah, last time was for your book on Counting Crows, Adam Duritz, and now you got a book on U2's pop album and PopMart tour. It's called 40-Foot Lemon, the complete story of U2's pop and PopMart. So first question, why a book on this specific album?
Yeah, well, to me, it's like here's the greatest band in the world, or one of the greatest band in the world, one of the biggest band in the world, and they make an album swinging for the fences, trying to create a masterpiece, and it sort of doesn't pan out as they had hoped it would. They have to turn in an album and start this tour. It's the biggest tour in rock history. They're a bit under rehearsed and not quite ready to go. The tour starts off rough and gets a bad reputation, and eventually they are able to turn it around. But to me, it's very interesting to see a great band at a time of a real challenge, and how they strive to overcome that, how they work to overcome that. In some ways, that's where you see the real character of a band like U2 emerge, is in those moments when, they're against the ropes and have to fight their way back. And we can argue about the merits of pop, and I think it's a much better album and tour than probably the band does. But needless to say, they weren't real happy with it. And for them, it didn't quite make the mark. And so we start with that premise, this great story of, here's an incredible band that's really trying to do something, and it doesn't quite work. And what do they do in that moment? And I think in some ways it's more interesting to talk about a Satanic Majesty's Request than it is to talk about the greatness of Sticky Fingers or Exile on Main Street. Again, as good as those albums are. And so we all know how great the Joshua Tree is. We know how great Achtung Baby is. We've read those books and they're awesome. But pop is very sort of understudied. And because the band's not real fond of that era, we don't know so much about it. And so I wanted to go back to that era. The first time I saw U2 was on the PopMart tour. My first two concerts seeing U2 were on the PopMart tour. So I was always very fond of the era and thought it was, sort of had gotten this reputation that it didn't deserve in the media. But that certainly did affect what happened, and it affected the band a lot too. So that to me was the why I wanted to write this book. It was just a really interesting story about a band at its most challenged, but also trying to do something really interesting. And it's always great to see a really good band swing for the fences, and they did on Pop and on PopMart. And they tried to create the greatest album of all time and the greatest tour of all time. And when an amazing band does something like that, even when they don't quite make the mark, it's always very interesting to take a look at.
To this day, U2 is very ambitious. Like even with right now with their shows in Vegas, they want it to be the biggest and best thing. But you did mention the Achtung Baby album. So they're coming off of Achtung Baby. Well, actually, Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby, which back to back is just unreal. How great
Right.
those albums are and how commercially successful. And then Zooropa, which did well, 1993. So what's the mindset going in when they decide to make pop in 1995 when this all starts? What's their mindset?
Yeah, their mindset is, we don't want to make an experimental album. We don't want to make Zooropa Part 2. We want to do something that's more popular and more, sort of, they wanted to introduce new sounds into what U2 was doing. And so the big things that were happening in music at the time in the mid 1990s were the EDM scene, the electronic music scene. And so they were they were always interested in electronic music like Kraftwerk and Depeche Mode, but they got interested in Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers and the Underworld and some of the groups that were around and doing interesting things at that time. And then also they were influenced by the Britpop scene, Oasis, Blur, Gene, Pulp, some of those bands that were also doing great things influenced by U2 at the time. And they were trying to introduce some of those sounds into the traditional U2 mix. So they wanted something that was contemporary, but also very much rooted in the U2 sound. So that was their approach. They had a number of songs ready that they had been working on during Achtung Baby and Zooropa that they brought into the studio. As always, they worked with a number of producers. They like to bring in not just one or two producers. They were working without Brian Eno for the first time in many, many years, more than a decade. And so this was new, but they always had a lot of producers on hand, a lot of people in the studio, cooks in the kitchen. It was very interesting to me how they like to bring in instigators, people who would deliberately disrupt the recording process so that they didn't get comfortable. Like they know that they're millionaire rock stars and that yes men are surrounding them. So they intentionally hire people like Howie B, who would come in and unplug one of Edge's guitars or start messing with the knobs on his amplifier, the perfectionist guitar player, messing with the knobs on his amplifier while they're jamming and just trying to disrupt the proceedings. And they hired an artist to come in and do a crazy art installation to get the lyrical inspiration. And so he wrote these passages and poetry all over the walls, and that was influencing the lyrics. So and he would write little notes like writer's block, or I don't hear a single, and like put it underneath Bono's mic stand or his lyric notebook. And so instigators, people who would disrupt intentionally the proceedings so that U2 didn't get comfortable. I thought that was a really fascinating way to work. I don't think I've ever seen a band do something like that, where they would intentionally bring in people who were gonna disrupt the proceedings. That was cool.
Yeah, chapter one is titled "It's Not Exactly Thriller," so that has to do with one particular producer. That's the first
Yeah.
guy they brought in, which is Nelly Hooper.
Right.
Talk about that comment. What does it have to do with Nelly Hooper?
Well, Nelly Hooper was a British producer who was doing all kinds of hot stuff at the time. He had worked on Madonna's albums, and he had worked with U2 on Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, which was that great song that they did for the Batman soundtrack. He had worked with them on Goldeneye from the James Bond soundtrack, which Edge and Bono put together for Tina Turner. So he was a producer who was around in the band's constellation and working with them. He was very into this sort of electronic and beats and things like that. And so they thought, let's keep working with Nelly Hooper. He's somebody we want to have on board. Now, Nelly Hooper worked with the band for months and months as this goes on, and they were recording for more than 6 months and jamming in the studio and endless jam sessions. And it just sort of wasn't going anywhere. And eventually he said to them, this is not exactly Thriller we're making here, is it? So he said, I don't think I could do anything for you anymore. And he quit the project, left the project in the middle of it, and just felt like the album wasn't happening. And so at this point, it becomes kind of a crisis because U2 owes an album to Island Records. They know they're going to probably have to delay it. And also they have to figure out now how to continue on without one of their key producers working with them too. So that created an early set of challenges for them in the middle of the recording process, and so that thus begins even like all of the crazy stories. I mean, it's a kind of amazing, just the sheer money that went into the making of this album, all of the different producers and everything else. The story was new to me as I was writing it, so I was discovering this whole story as I'm going along too, and going like, wow, I had no idea that they had this kind of process in the studio. I thought it was really interesting. And so to me, I absolutely wanted to take the readers into that inner bubble of the studio, hear from some of these other producers and voices that were in there, hear from everybody in the band, and some of the journalists who were invited to come in and take a look at it and at the process, and just sort of see what this looks like. What does it look like when a mega huge, very wealthy band comes together to create a new album? This is not a band where there's rails of cocaine all over the studio and groupies everywhere. So the focus is on the music, and that's interesting too, because this is a band that's very committed to making a great album, and that's what it's all about. And that process to me was just really interesting.
One thing I didn't know until reading the book is that Larry Mullen was not happy with the way things started. Talk about that, and also similar to what's happening now, where his body starting to break down in the mid 90s. He's starting to experience some issues where he's got to address. So that held things up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are interesting connections to what's happening with the band in Las Vegas at the Sphere shows and Larry Mullen Jr. But yes, Larry Mullen had long-standing back issues that had dated back years and years that he never had repaired, and finally decided, I cannot wait anymore. I have to get this fixed. And so I have to get surgery, and it's going to be months for me to recover. The band was interested in doing some electronic stuff. They wanted to work with loops and samples and things like that. Anyway, they were working with people like Nelly Hooper and Howie B, who were very much into the electronic music. So they thought, well, this is a good starting place. We'll start with these producers doing the beats and the loops. We'll work with that while Larry's recovering, and then he can come in and work with us. But that was upsetting to Larry because he said, at the beginning of the album is often where the key decisions are made, and he felt kind of cut out of that process, and had even sort of appealed through Brian Eno to, for the band to just wait until he had recovered, but they didn't want to. They wanted to get started and sort of went ahead without him anyway. Eventually, he does come back to the studio, and he was very upset that they had sort of gone so far into the beats and the loops and things like that, and insisted that all of that be replaced with his own drumming. He said, if you want to sample somebody, you can sample me playing a beat rather than some record. And so they had to go back and sort of redo everything and try to recreate those drum loops with Larry playing live, and then have the band go back and do that. So it all, again, delayed things a lot, slowed things down, and just made the process take longer. But eventually he did come back, and a lot of the playing on the album is him. I mean, there are beats and loops and things like that, but much of it comes from Larry Mullen Jr. in the end.
And it is strange seeing someone else behind the kit watching these U2 shows,
True.
Sphere shows.
True.
It is strange. Yeah. One song that I remember being a favorite among fans who were, even those who were disappointed in the album overall, Staring at the Sun. That was like the closest to U2 that we were hearing, because everything else on the album is just, it's different. And talk about that one. That wasn't the lead single, but it was a song that all the guys in the band said, yeah, this is going to be a really good single. They all felt strongly about that.
They did. Yeah, that was a song that they did bring with them from those Europa sessions in a very embryonic form. So they just had a couple of chords and some ideas, but it was something that they brought to the sessions and wanted to work on. And as soon as it kind of clicked and came together, everyone was in agreement that this was going to be the song. They thought that this was the one. They thought that this was the Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, or the Stay Far Away So Close. This was going to be the key signature song of the album that defined the album, and also was a worldwide smash that filled all of these stadiums that they were going to play. So there was a lot riding on this song. They had a lot of belief in it and thought that it was going to be basically a smash. It was one that came early in the process and gave them some real confidence in the album. And of course, spoiler alert, it doesn't quite pan out that way on the charts for them, and doesn't become what they had envisioned in the end. And so, again, part of the story here is, how does a band deal with that sort of challenge, musically, artistically, psychologically? That to me was, again, just a fascinating component of the story.
Yeah, what's crazy is that song, that single Staring at the Sun, released almost on this day. It says here, according to Wikipedia, April 14th, 1997. Okay. But here's, I guess this might be a shocker, but this is one of my least favorite songs on the album. The ones that I love, the U2 fans are going to probably hate me, but I love electronic beats. I love all that stuff. So that's why I was digging a lot of these songs, like Mofo and Gone, and
love it.
Trying to think of the other ones that
I think Last Night on Earth is another great
song
from this album. Please is a song that people like a lot. Mofo is an amazing song, and that was one that went through a lot of iterations. Started out more as a classic kind of rock, straight ahead rock song, and then eventually morphed into this kind of crazy techno thing. One of the interesting little facts about that song is that Larry Mullen is playing live. That's a live take from Larry Mullen on that cut. That sounds more like an electronic beat than anything else. And that kind of blew everybody's minds that he was able to play that live along with the track and as perfectly as he did. It's an incredible take.
They have talked about him though, just being super tight, like mind blowing how he's able to lay down a beat and be so near perfect every
chemistry.
time.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. When you replace somebody like Larry Mullen in Las Vegas at the Sphere, that chemistry, they're one of those bands, the few bands where these are the same four original members since, they were teenagers. It's incredible.
ZZ
And
Top was
so,
was up there until
yeah,
until
yeah.
um, Dusty Hill passed, and Green
Hmm.
Day's up there too. Green Day's way up on that list.
Yeah,
Remember
but
Rolling
isn't
Stone?
that neat? Yeah, isn't that neat when you have a band that's been together that long? And so, yeah, somebody like Larry, to remove him, even if you replace him with somebody who's incredible, it's that chemistry is impossible to replace.
Discotheque was the lead single. That started out
Mhm.
of a jam session with an old school hip hop or old school hip hop records.
Like a EDM record, yeah, Fane, the word Fane, but and it was like an EDM kind of a hit song. That was again, Howie B was like a DJ electronic guy. He had turntables set up right in the studio, and he would throw on albums, and the band would jam along, and so they jammed along with that song, and it just kind of clicked in and all worked. And that was another one that it came out of a jam session in the studio, like a lot of the songs on this album. And eventually as soon as they were done with that one, they knew like this is going to be the first single. This has got that, that pizzazz and that bounce and that bang that we really like. You see the continuity songs like The Fly that were kind of similar, even like Numb a little bit. And then subsequently, I think songs like Elevation and Vertigo are very much in the vein of Discotheque. As much as that song generated some controversy, mostly because of the video, to me, the song very much fit in with the kind of things that they had been doing and have done, and it worked well. I thought it was fine, as a song and as a single and as a way to launch the album. But it did the video especially generated some controversy because
Yeah, let's talk about
yeah.
that. Let's talk about that. Yeah, because didn't what the Edge was the one who said they're looking to rebrand themselves. Like they felt
Yeah.
that people felt they took themselves too seriously. So this was an attempt to reverse that image and just have some
Yeah,
fun.
to be a little more fun,
Yeah,
right? And
dressing up as the
and
Village People.
they dressed up as the village people. This was it was a video director, Stefan Sinawi, who had done a lot of iconic videos for the Chili Peppers and for Smashing Pumpkins and even for U2. So this is a very well-known director who's got great concepts. He's a real artist. And so he has this concept of we're going to film them performing inside a disco ball. And then at the end, it's only the last 30 seconds of the video, by the way, they pop in as the village people, dressed as the village people with the synchronized dance moves. Larry hated this. It's funny in the video, you can see he really dislikes this, and they actually use that in the video. So you can see his dislike for this
Yeah, this
whole
this was not his best experience
no,
of all
no,
the
no.
albums. This is just not one he was happy with.
Yeah, and I think particularly like probably that moment filming the discotheque video, him dressed as a cowboy from the Village People, that was probably one of the low points for him, where
Yeah,
where
he
he
just felt
did,
he felt the band was going too far. I think he
yeah,
just
he
felt,
he questioned the integrity of what they were doing. Yeah,
yeah, overall, even just the songs, he just wondered like, where are we going with this, guys? Which is interesting
yeah.
because you have to all be on the same page, and maybe
Hmm.
that had something to do with the lack of success. But talk
Hmm.
about, well, speaking to that, you say that the songs on Pop lack that anthemic sing along aspect to them.
Hmm.
That has a
Yeah.
lot to do with the fact that a lot of these songs stem from jam sessions, you think?
I do think so that it wasn't they weren't crafted in the way that the traditional song, not all of them, some of them very much were. I think songs like Staring at the Sun are maybe more traditional, but yeah, they were rooted in jams. And so you have songs like Gone or Discotheque that are basically just rooted in a riff and then trying to build the song out of that, which is fine. But that's just different from they have a catalog full of these anthemic sing-along songs like even things like Mysterious Ways or One, or Stay Far Away So Close in their so-called experimental period. They're full of rich melodies that you can sing along with and raise your lighters or now your cell phones in the air and sing along in concert. And so even though I like the album, I think it's an album that gets better with repeated listening and repeated excavation. It's also not maybe as accessible as their other albums because I don't think that it has that song. It doesn't have the One or the Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For or the Stay Far Away So Close, where it's like that song that they were looking for, that one that is just a 10 out of 10 all-time generation-defining classic. They had a string of those, and every one of their albums had at least one or sometimes multiple
Beautiful Day.
iterations. Yeah, yeah, so many songs. And so
Hmm.
I think that pop does not have that kind of song on it. And because of that, in some ways, the fans, just didn't connect with it as much. And also, I think U2 didn't like it as much because it wasn't as well received as they had hoped. I think for them, they consider it to be a big failure. And even though I think a lot of us, those of us who are fans of the album, think, well, let's not rush to, just throw the whole thing away. There are a lot of good things to like about the album and the tour as well, for sure. And so it's in some ways it's unfortunate that they don't embrace it the way that they do some of their other works, even the works from that era.
How many songs do they play from the album nowadays? Did they
Zero.
play any? Zero.
No, no, no. The last time they played anything from this album was in 2018, but that was Staring at the Sun. But really, most of the songs they never played again. Three of the songs, there's 12 songs on the album, so three of them they retired during the tour. So they started playing them and then retired them, stopped playing them during the tour, never played them again. A bunch of songs, songs like Mofo and Last Night on Earth and If You Wear That Velvet Dress, they never played them again after PopMart. Although they were played on every show on PopMart. A couple of songs like Gone and Please, that they like those songs. Those survived a little bit longer. They played those on the 2001 tour.
They did, yeah.
And yeah, a couple in the 2005 tour. I think they played maybe it was Wake Up Dead Man or Discotheque or something a couple of times. But for the most part, they have not played the majority of the songs they never played again after the tour. And most of them they haven't played since the 2001 tour. So it's an album that for them, it just they were not happy with it. They re-recorded or remixed or redid half the songs on the album. So even from the very beginning, right after the first date of PopMart, they were in the studio re-recording songs for the videos and for the singles. So they were never happy with it. They've always even still today, they talk about going back and redoing it.
They do, so. And they talked about reissuing it maybe with additional tracks, unreleased tracks. I remember there was like 10, 15 years ago that they were talking about that, but
I would love it, but we'll see. It'd be great if they did, because they have hundreds of hours of stuff from the studio that they recorded. So it would be
really
fascinating. Yeah, fascinating to let the world hear some of that. For sure.
I didn't realize how much of an impact Oasis had on this album until reading the book. Talk about that. How well it specifically influenced Gone. And didn't Bono go see an Oasis show?
Yeah, he was a big fan, and it's Oasis was really just having their moment at this time. They had really just hit the height of their fame, the height of their cultural impact. They had released in 1995 What's the Story, Morning Glory. It's their second album, which has Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova and Don't Look Back in Anger, these amazing songs. And U2, I think, were very admiring of a band like Oasis, but also Oasis had clearly been influenced by U2 and also were fans of theirs. And so Bono attended one of their shows during the recording of Pop, but also Gone was a song that was very much influenced by, I think, songs like Supersonic by Oasis. You can really hear the roots of Oasis in a song like Gone. And even I think songs like Staring at the Sun were sort of influenced by what Oasis were doing. Oasis did play a couple of shows on the PopMart tour, and there's a great story that I found about them all going out on a night on the town, and one comes on the radio as they're all in a van together, and the Gallagher brothers start singing along and saying, it's the greatest song of all time. They know every word, and then Bono's singing with them, and it's just cool. Like, you can imagine a moment like that where in the back of some van somewhere. There were so many incredible moments, and just the life that U2 lives, where one day we're hanging out with Oasis at their concert, the next day we're having lunch with the president, the next day we're meeting Nelson Mandela. I couldn't believe the life that they live, just their day to day. It's a wild story. It's an interesting life.
Yeah. Let's talk about Mofo again. This may be the best example of the drastic changes in the sonic approaches to the album. Can you talk about some of the things they did on this track in the studio? There's a lot of production.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, it was more of a traditional song, originally like a traditional rocker. Maybe you would think of something like Desire or something like that, like beat heavy, with just more of a straightforward guitar. But then they kind of souped it up, worked on it, turned it into, this was really influenced by groups like the Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers. This is where that influence, you could really hear it. And so it becomes almost this techno like EDM thing. They souped it up. They replaced Adam's bass with a keyboard bass, so that's where it gets that, giant kind of crazy sound. And as I said, yeah, it was a perfect opener.
Love it.
They
Yeah.
opened with Mofo on the
This
PopMart
album is
tour. It's
best
such a
on
great
Saturday
opener.
nights when you're going out.
It's
For me,
amazing.
it
Yeah,
was, yeah. Every time I'd go out with
yeah.
my buddies on a Saturday night, I'd crank this song up. The album too.
It's so good. Yeah. I think Mofo is what's so cool about it is it's the only song like that on the album. And I think that's what makes it great. If there were two, three, or if it was a whole album of that, I don't think I would like it as much at all. But because it stands out, it's so unique and so interesting sounding. There's really nothing like that in their whole catalog. I love it. I think it's very cool and interesting.
It's
And
very trippy.
even if, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay, so maybe, not every song that U2 releases is a generation defining classic, but I can just really appreciate the artistry of an album like this, and also that they were really trying. They're not phoning this in. They're not slapping something together. They're not satisfied with a first take or something like that. They're really trying to craft a masterpiece. And a song like Mofo, you hear the craft work and also the work of all of the producers getting in and getting involved in that. So when it comes together like a song like that, to me, that's where this album really took what they were doing on Zooropa and Achtung Baby and took it in somewhere else and took it somewhere new. We were hearing things we hadn't heard on those albums, and to me, helps to make a great capper for this kind of experimental period that they had in the 1990s.
Here's the quote that says a lot about Bono seeing where things were headed. Gotta find it here because he's talking about how he was noticing the charts at the time, and there was a lot of dance, techno. I think he was just seeing where things were headed, and boy, was he ever right. There's,
Yeah.
you look at the top 40 charts now, no rock and roll, none.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And he could
So
see that. And he said he was very influenced by rap and hip hop, electronic music.
yeah,
The charts were full of, this is the era of Tupac and Biggie were at the height of their fame. And everything that was going on in, I think, rap music was also interesting to him. And Bono could see that. He said rock music has gotten very boring. It's gotten very safe. It's gotten very stale. So part of the, pop was an effort to bring in some of these new sounds and new ideas into their music. In the demos that are available of pop, you can often hear Bono rapping, like really actually rapping. So you don't hear like a rap song on the album, but even songs like Mofo, you hear some little traces of the hip hop in there too.
yeah. Here's the quote from November 1996. We are still a rock and roll band, but when we looked around last year, it was clear that hip hop and dance artists are making the music that defines these closing years of the 20th century. And we wanted to see what parts of that music would work for us. So they were thinking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Yeah,
thinking maybe
always.
if we could find something here that we can latch onto, that'll be the next phase of U2. As we know, that wasn't the case. And actually, I think without this album, we don't get all that you leave behind.
Yeah,
With Beautiful
I
Day, and
agree.
they went
Yeah,
back to their roots.
yeah, it enabled them to do that. And in some ways, it's Larry's critique was that they had maybe gone too far, taken it too far. I think the band even started to question whether that was the case. And so that enabled them to do what they had done at the end of the 1980s, which was go back and reinvent themselves all over again. And then in this case, it was a journey back. And, in some ways that was disappointing to those of us who loved their 90s period and thought that it was very interesting. But at the same time, I think that enabled the band to have another new phase of their career that they probably wouldn't have had if they had done Zooropa 2 instead of, if they had just stuck with this experimental thing and not sort of returned to their roots, so to speak.
And didn't they? Well, they did because I'm looking here. Sweetest Thing was probably intentionally a way to get back on track with the fans too. That was a song I think from the Joshua Tree sessions,
It,
but
it was. Yeah, it's a B-side from Joshua Tree.
yeah,
Like so many songs, they re-recorded it for that single that they released in 98 or something like that. And that was part of, they had said they would never do a best of album, but they released a best of, and it was the best of the 80s. There was nothing from the 90s experimental period, nothing from Achtung Baby forward on that first best of. It was all stuff from the classic 80s period, Joshua Tree, War, and things like that, at B-sides from that era as well. And I think when that album was successful and that video was successful, I think that was a moment for them where they went, okay, our fans have said that they don't want this pop album and PopMart tour, perhaps, but they are embracing, the traditional sound of the band. And so I think in some ways that influenced their decision to return to their 80s kind of traditional sound. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of U2 in the 80s as well. I would never disparage that. I think in some ways, what I love so much about their 90s period is because of what they did in the 80s. That makes their 90s period far more interesting than if that was the only thing they had ever done. So,
and it makes what they did with Achtung Baby just mind blowing as far as its commercial success because they took such a risk with that, such a risk, and it paid off.
huge.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
Yes.
That You Can't Leave Behind came out in 2000, and then
Mhm.
you could say the best of 1980 to 1990 was 1998. And the
Right.
song Sweetest Thing was a hit, so it kind of get them back on track again. Hey guys, quick heads up from the grooming front lines. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be a risky business anymore. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped and their Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, you can forget about nicking your bits. This trimmer is all about keeping your things smooth and safe, so you can trim with confidence. Fancy a stress-free shave and some savings? Head over to manscaped.com now and save 20% off plus free shipping by using the code BOOKEDONROCK. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming and no surprises. Guys, don't be like me. Don't use a cheap razor, because if you do, get yourself a lot of Band-Aids. It's going to be a war zone down there. This 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads. A standard one for taking a little off the top and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. With dual LED spotlights, you'll achieve better visibility, making every trim more precise and hassle-free. And guys, if you're worried about making a mess, don't worry. This thing's good in the shower, in the tub, in the ocean. And if that's not all, it comes in a nice traveling case so you can take it wherever you go. Get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code BOOKEDONROCK. That's 20% off plus free shipping by using the code BOOKEDONROCK. Show your balls some love. Feel free as a dove. So the book gets into, as I mentioned, not just the album, but the tour. So let's get into the tour. Now, the one image that always stood out from that tour, I think for many, is Bono in that muscle shirt.
Right.
What's the story behind that? And talk about the different characters that he and the band took on each show.
So this was another thing that I learned when I was writing the book. I had no idea. I knew about the muscle shirt like everybody, but I didn't know the story. And one of the things was, how do I tell the story of PopMart? Because there was so much planning that went into PopMart, and that took place during the recording of the album. And so as they're recording this album, they begin planning the tour without having any idea what the album is going to be. At the beginning, they really didn't even have any songs or anything. It was just kind of ideas. So
a little bit of pressure,
planning,
huh?
Yeah. So they're putting, but it's also going to be the biggest tour of all time. They knew that. They wanted to top Zoo TV. It was supposed to be bigger, better. And Willie Williams, their longtime director, came in and said, all right, we're not going to go downscale. We're going to make this bigger and better. And so they spent a lot of time and a lot of money developing PopMart. And one of the things that they decided to do was that if we're going to have the craziest tour of all time, we can't just be up there in jeans and t-shirts. We have to have some cool things to wear. And so they have a fashion, basically a fashion stylist, like a band stylist who they've worked with for years, and a consultant. They dispatched her, Sharon Blankson, off to Paris to the menswear shows. She found a eccentric Belgian designer named Walter van Beirendonk, who had created these kind of crazy costumes and characters. And she said, this would be cool. So they flew him back to Ireland. and said, let's put you to work. And so they gave him some ideas. They had some songs at this point. They had some concepts. They had the sort of pop concept. And so he went to work on these costumes and designed these iconic costumes. His idea was based on superheroes. So he said, I'm going to turn them into superheroes for this like crazy tour that they're doing. And the muscle shirt was part of that. And so we think of Bono and the muscle shirt, but every member of the band wore that muscle shirt as sort of their undergarment, because they're all supposed to be like these superheroes. And then they put on costumes over that. And so the Edge was the rhinestone cowboy, and Adam is the Pop-Tart in his crazy costume with the mask and the goggles and the hard hat. Larry basically looks like Larry no matter what. And then Bono,
the same haircut he's had. He's always had
Larry, it's like you do even
military
even
haircut
in this era. Yeah, it's the same guy he's been since he was a teenager. It's great. You can't change Larry. I love that. But
and
Bono,
he never ages too. Bono always laughs about
that. He's amazing. Yeah. So Bono, though, decided he wanted to play like almost a different character in each song. And I don't know, again, if they've done anything like this on any other tour, but then working with this Belgian designer, he put together a series of costumes. And so he comes out as the boxer at the beginning with Mofo. He takes that off and becomes Action Man for a while, becomes Bono Man. He's got Lopsided Man, Walking Target, a whole bunch of different costumes. And so in each song, he gets a new costume, takes on a new persona. It's almost like what he did with The Fly, but in each song, he's doing something different. So I thought that was very cool and interesting. I had no idea about anything that I just told you when I was writing the book. All I knew was, oh yeah, they had the crazy costumes, but I didn't know the backstory there. And so that to me made the concerts much more interesting when I realized what it was they were trying to do with these costumes and all of the changes and stuff. It was almost like, I mean, I don't want to say like a Las Vegas style show, but it was a show. It wasn't just a concert, you know, some guys in jeans and t-shirts. This was a spectacle. And part of that was the costuming was a big part of that too. And I thought that was very cool.
And the stage props, the gigantic lemon. So why were
the 40-foot lemon? Yeah.
The 40-foot. So why were they skeptical that they wouldn't be able to pull this off?
Well, they had a lot riding on the lemon. The lemon was supposed to be like the Funkadelic spaceship. If you know the Parliament Funkadelic tours from the 1970s, those guys influenced by Kiss literally came on stage on a spaceship and came out on a spaceship like the Funk Aliens. And so U2 was kind of inspired by that. They had the song Lemon, and they had the discotheque thing too. And so they were like, let's put all this together. It becomes this giant like spinning lemon disco ball thing that is going to deliver us onto the stage. So the idea was, instead of having an encore where they walk off stage and they sit backstage for 5 minutes while everybody claps, they said, instead of doing that, we're not going to have an encore. We're going to walk off stage and go get in the lemon. We're going to play Lemon, the song Lemon, while this lemon comes out on stage with the smoke and the lights and everything. It's going to open up, and then we're going to come down off the lemon and play discotheque. And so instead of an encore, that's what you're going to see. You're not going to sit there and clap and go, you know, okay, knowing they're coming back out. You're going to get this kind of lemon sequence. And they were concerned from the beginning that this wasn't going to work, that the lemon wouldn't open, or that something was going to mess up.
They saw Spinal Tap.
They saw Spinal Tap. That's right. Yeah. So they knew.
He's stuck in the pod.
Yeah. And this did happen during the rehearsals in Las Vegas. And so they were very concerned that this wasn't going to work. And so the lemon in some ways became a metaphor, for some said, for the whole tour of this, you know, giant spectacle lemon that's kind of, you know, malfunctioning, or we're hoping it's not. So the 40-foot lemon, they had the big golden arch like McDonald's. Yeah. They had the swizzle stick, the olive. Their idea was influenced by Andy Warhol. And I touch on this in the book too. But one of the things, again, I think is so cool about this tour is they were bringing in works of pop art. And so they started with Andy Warhol, and they're bringing in Roy Lichtenstein, and they're bringing in Keith Haring, these famous pop artists, and bringing all of their stuff onto the visuals and onto the screen. It was influenced by Warhol's idea of like the soup cans. We can take a commercial product like soup, Campbell's soup, and turn it into a work of art, because that's not a soup can. It's a painting of a soup can. and it becomes a work of art. And so their idea for the tour was, we're going to have this commercial enterprise, almost like a McDonald's enterprise, but it's going to be a work of art. There's going to be this soul underneath it. That was the concept for PopMart. And to me, again, I loved the artistry of it, how they brought in these amazing artists in addition to the famous pop artists, brought in all of this art and made it sync with the video and work on stage. It was just so ambitious and so interesting. And I don't think that, again, they've ever done anything quite so interesting in some ways. I loved the tour. I thought it was great.
Yeah. It put a lot of money into it. And I don't recall in the book if you mentioned, though, did they lose money on this tour?
No, they didn't. There was some things that were interesting. The tour made money. It was a successful tour for a couple of reasons. One, they sold the rights outright for $100 million for the tour to Concert Promotions International, so a company. And they basically said, you write us a check for $100 million, and then you could go put on all the shows and we'll show up and play them. And with 93 shows planned, you can sort of do the math on it. They were thinking, okay, if we play a couple of shows a week, then this is going to work out financially. So that for them, they never really had to worry about the finances, other than making sure that they could logistically get this show on budget and on time to all of these locations, but they already basically had a check. The tour itself grossed 170 million. So Concert Promotions International did just fine with their $70 million profit on the tour. One of the reasons it was successful was that it sold out stadiums all over the world. Even though it didn't do quite so well in North America, it also sold out Giant Stadium. It sold out Soldier Field. It sold out some, huge venues here in the United States as well, and did very well in some places, even in the US. But also the ticket prices were high, and at the time quite high. And that's one of the reasons it did well. Even if you have let's say 40,000 people in a stadium that holds 80,000, if they're paying a high ticket price, then you're making some money in the end. So the tour actually financially was a success. It got tagged with this narrative as being a failure, and that really kind of stuck despite the financial success, and I would argue the artistic success. It was tagged as a failure and became kind of remembered as a failure, and the band certainly viewed it as such, I would say.
So there were venues in North America that didn't sell out?
Oh,
You
they did
mentioned
not.
that in the book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like
No, they had.
how bad? I mean, what were we talking? I mean, you said because it was strange for the band to see that. That had to have bummed them out. Like you're not selling out everywhere you go. Which cities were the weakest?
From the beginning, yeah, from the beginning. I think the second show was at Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego, and I think it was half full.
Wow.
That's a big place. I've seen a concert there. That's a huge place. And again, they brought in a lot of people, but when you have a massive venue and it's half full, it doesn't look good. And so from the beginning, they had shows like San Diego that didn't do well. Clemson, South Carolina, I think it was 18,000 in a football stadium that held 80,000 or something was the worst one. They had a bunch of shows in Florida that were like that. So and I don't know if I didn't want it to be like a Wikipedia article or an encyclopedia, but certainly some of the shows that really were had really low turnouts. I did mention those, and then also, as I said, they had plenty of places where they either played multiple nights or sold out, or close to sold out the venue. The first night in Vegas was sold out. So it wasn't the disaster that the media painted it to be. But at the same time, I would argue that Bono never forgot some of those performances where he's playing to empty stadiums, and they even start kind of joking about it on stage and talking about it on stage. And I think it affected the psyche of the band a lot.
Oh, sure, sure. Now the set list is interesting too, because they went heavy on the songs from pop. So this is early internet era, but I'm sure word got out too that they're going to be playing the hits, but get ready, they're going to be playing a lot. I'm looking at the set list in front of me right here.
That's right, yeah.
And we got Mofo. This is an average set list for PopMart Tour. Mofo, okay. They led with I Will Follow, Gone, Even Better Than the Real Thing, Last Night on Earth, Until the End of the World, New Year's Day, Pride in the Name of Love, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, All I Want Is You, Sunday Bloody Sunday. That's pretty decent, though. They're going old classics on that. But then you get Miami, which is, I don't like Miami. I never liked that song.
It's a divisive song.
I don't like that song. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a divisive song. I love it. It's one of my favorite songs on the album. Yeah,
Bullet to
but
Blue
that's fine.
Sky.
I know
Yeah,
people
yeah,
like it.
no, it's
Yeah,
just yeah, it's one of I just U2 in
people hate
Miami.
it.
I don't I can't
Well,
picture
in
the
the
guys
book,
hanging out in
I
Miami.
talk about how they packed up and moved the whole production
Right.
to Miami in the middle of the album, thinking that it was going to give them that sense of place, like Berlin or Red Rocks or something on their classic albums. They did write the song Miami in Miami, but it never kind of panned out the way that they had hoped.
Yeah, U2. When I think of U2, I think of like the bitter cold, like the videos of
Yeah.
the snow.
Yeah, right. Well, you even mentioned "Do You Feel Loved" in your email
Yep.
as a song that you liked, and I think that
Yeah.
that's like a sultry kind of Miami, and that's what they were going for, like a hot, sultry night in the
So yeah,
humid heat and stuff like that.
go
But
figure.
that
What the
set
hell am I
list
thinking?
that set list you mentioned, I mean, they had already started to tweak it when they started out. First of all, they intended to play 11 of the 12 pop songs. They ended up playing 10 at the beginning of the tour. As I said, they dumped some of the songs in the middle of as they went along the tour, Miami
Okay.
being one of them.
Yeah.
But they started very heavy, as they had with Achtung Baby. Let's not forget that U2 opened the Zoo TV tour with 8 songs from their new album. Now it's a classic album and we all love it. It was a great album then. Those songs were great. They were right to do that, smart to do that, brave to do that, sure. But it's not surprising that they wanted to play a lot of the new album because they're a band that did that also on Zoo TV. And so I think they did want to play a lot of it and really showcase the new album. But they also, some of the songs from the beginning, "Do You Feel Loved" was one of them, just weren't getting the reception that they hoped for. And every time they went and played one of their classics, like "All I Want Is You" is a song that they brought on in the middle of the tour, the audience goes crazy over those kind of songs. And so they realized like we have to play some more of our classic material. And they did start to eventually, I think at the end of the tour, they were down to 7 songs from pop as opposed
Mm,
to 10. And they
yeah.
had gotten rid of 3 of them and brought on "Wake Up Dead Man," which they hadn't started with. In the end, they played 11 of the songs. And I think the only song that didn't get played on the tour in full was "Playboy Mansion."
Okay. Yeah. And notice here, Do You Feel Loved is not on the average set list. This is coming from
Yeah.
setlist.fm. Yeah, I left off with
Yeah,
Miami,
yeah.
and then they went into Bullet to Blue Sky, Please, Where the Streets Have No
Mhm.
Name for the encore, Staring at the Sun, Lemon Perfecto Mix, then Discotheque, If You Wear That Velvet Dress, Encore 2, With or Without You, Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, Mysterious Ways in 1. So the second encore was heavy on the hits.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when they started out, I think they only had maybe 8 songs that they were playing that were from the pre-pop era. I mean, imagine
Mm,
U2's catalog, their whole catalog, and only playing those, only having 8 songs to represent all of those albums. And I do think that that was a problem. I also think that they didn't play any songs from Zooropa. That Lemon is a remix that they played like a track of it during the Lemon sequence, but they didn't play any songs from Zooropa, their previous album. I thought that was a great album. And I also thought that some of those songs would have worked really well in the context of pop and what they were doing with pop. So
the song
as a
Lemon,
fan,
they could have played that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They didn't play the song
They
Lemon,
played
which
the
to me, yeah,
What's
to
the
me, it's like, how
perfecto
can you
mix
not play
again?
11? Yeah,
What's
it's
that?
like a kind of a dance remix of the Lemon
Yeah.
song,
Was it playing
like
over the
an
loudspeaker? It wasn't played
EDM.
by the band. It
Yeah,
was.
right. Correct. They just played a track of it, like a CD of it, as this Lemon sequence is taking place with the smoke and stuff. So to me, that doesn't count. And it's not like for those of us who love that song Lemon, which I love that song. I think it's a
Yeah.
great song. This is not that song. It's just not. It's a
Yeah.
very different sounding remix. And so to me, it was disappointing as a fan to not hear anything from the Zooropa album because I just thought that was a great album. And also there was some nice linkages to what they were doing with pop. Many of the songs came from those same sessions. So
Right. Right. It
that
just
was kind of a lost opportunity.
seemed like a natural progression from that album to pop.
Kind
Talk
of,
about
yeah.
the highlight moment probably is the Mothers of the Disappeared moment in Argentina. Right. That's like the
Yeah,
highlight. Talk about that. That was
absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, and many powerful moments. Bono had back in the 80s had traveled to South America and had met in El Salvador the mothers of the disappeared. And these were mothers whose sons and sometimes daughters had simply disappeared. The government had disappeared them. And so they didn't know what happened to them. They weren't never heard from them again, and of course they assumed that they were lost. And so to commemorate this and also to protest this, the mothers would march silently in the city square every week and had been doing this for years. And so Bono wrote the song Mothers of the Disappeared, which is the last song on the Joshua Tree about this, and had really sort of connected with this idea. When they went to South America, this was the first time that U2 had played some of these places. And so going to Argentina, he met with the mothers of the disappeared who were there, who had been influenced by the mothers in El Salvador and who were doing the same thing. And he recorded some things with them and did some video things with them, but also brought them on stage and had them say their sons' names and hold up signs of their sons' names and to sort of commemorate it. So it was a very serious moment. And then he recreated, the band recreated this moment again when they went to Chile. And there were also a group of mothers there. And so this became kind of one of the themes of some of their South American shows. And also they played the song Mothers That Had Disappeared for the first time in, I think it was 10 years at one of those shows. So some really, in some ways, this created a bit of an issue too, because this is a very serious moment, and it's sort of juxtaposed with the spinning lemon disco ball and the PopMart costumes and stuff like that. There was some incongruity there, and I think that juxtaposition was also something that didn't necessarily sit right with audiences or the band. It's sort of like, it's kind of hard to have a serious moment here when you have all of these crazy costumes and the golden arch and stuff around us. So I think that was a odd dynamic as well. The tour got more serious in some ways, but the staging was still the same. So
Yeah, I always look back on Pop as Achtung Baby on steroids. Like you see that dude on steroids, you're like, whoa, dude, okay, you took it a little too far. A few years ago, you were looking like you were in great shape. Now you're just looking like, okay, I think you got to dial it back. So I think that's what it is. And before I ask you, because you do mention in the introduction about how this album and era of U2 deserve a second look. So I want to ask you why you feel that way. But let's talk about, so your favorite tracks from this album, what would they be? Because I got mine.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mentioned Mofo is one of my favorites. Gone is definitely one of my favorites. I do like Miami. I think, again, that's a song that there's no other U2 song that sounds like it. And for that alone, it's interesting to me. But also, I just think I think it works, whatever they were trying to do. I like that. I really, those are some of my favorites. I think Discotheque's good. If I didn't say Last Night on Earth, I want to mention that again, because that's a really good one. Gone is one of my very favorites. Mofo, I think, is amazing. It's a great album. It's one of those albums that, to me, I spent a lot of the last year listening to this album, more than I probably ever have, and it really grew on me. I came to appreciate it a lot more than I probably did when I first heard it. I really liked it when I first heard it, but I came to really appreciate this album. And I think in some ways, when you go back and you're like, okay, this is U2. They were in their mid-30s. They were still young. They were still full of fire and energy, and they were still, ambitious and ready to take on the world. And they had the energy and the ambition to do it. And so looking back, this was just after their commercial peak, just after the height of their creative and commercial peak and their cultural influence. This is just past it. And it turns out that, to me, it is an era worth revisiting, because it is the band at their most ambitious. It is them at their most interesting in some ways. You get all of these sounds that we haven't heard on any other album. You get a tour that we haven't. It was a spectacle in video and multimedia, but I really felt like bringing in the art part of it and the sort of pop art part of it, and especially the costume changes, made it a more interesting tour in some ways, or certainly unique in their history of touring. So to me, it's an era that really stands out in some ways, especially as we go back and revisit it. I think it holds up incredibly well. One of the things I did was watched every single one of basically almost every single one of these shows, the PopMart tour, and it really did improve a lot. It was incredible how good that tour got towards the end. I watched the first show in Vegas and thought, well, that wasn't that bad. It was pretty good. I didn't, I've seen lots of bands flub songs and restart them. Many great bands have done that, and they just laugh and restart the song. So I didn't see it as a huge disaster that it was painted out to be. But I noticed by even the middle of the first leg of the tour, and boy, certainly by the end of the tour, that thing had really come together into a powerful, powerful live spectacle with the visuals. I think they got the set list really to work right, and I thought it was amazing. I thought it was, as Bono called it, he said it was the greatest show on earth, and so that's is why I called that fourth leg the greatest show on earth, because I think it had really become that at that point. And I think the band agreed too. It's too bad to hear them now disparage pop and disparage the pop era, because to me it's an era that really has aged quite well. Yeah.
Now, did they release a professional video of the concert?
They did. They released
They
a
did.
home video in 1998, live from Mexico City. They released that was on VHS in 1998, but then they re-released it on DVD later. It's still available, and it's great. It doesn't have Miami, so you'll like it for that. They had cut Miami by that point, but it's a killer performance, and I think maybe it was mostly the second night in Mexico that is the show, but it really shows how much the tour had come together. They were right, I think, for choosing that particular show. And they released that on home video, and they have released audio from that as well, subsequently, from that same Mexico City show at a few different iterations. So there has been a little bit of I think they like PopMart more than they like Pop, the album. And so they have, kept the video and the audio stuff available out there. Of course, I curated a YouTube playlist as well with almost all the shows and a lot of the cool things that I found, all from the pop era, that I put on a YouTube playlist and put it together. So if you find like the book trailer for this on YouTube, you can find the whole playlist. And it has a lot of these things that I found when I was researching the book. And it's very cool. I think if you go back and you can watch the whole Mexico City show online. And it's mind-blowing, I think. I think if you're a U2 fan, I think you really like it, for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking through. There's a quote online from The Edge, said, "The Edge still viewed Pop as a quote unquote great record," and said, quote, "I was very proud of it by the end of the tour. We finally figured out by the time we made the DVD. It was an amazing show that I'm really proud of." And then in the same interview, he says, quote, "We started out trying to make a dance culture record and then realized at the end, there are things we can do that no EDM producer or artist can do. So let's try and have it both ways. In that case, we probably went too far in the other direction. We probably needed to allow a bit more of the electronica to survive." All right, so here are my songs, my picks from the album that I
I'm dying to
like
know.
or love. Discotheque I like. Do You Feel Loved? Love. Mofo, love. If God Will Send His Angels, really like. Staring at the Sun. Yeah, I mean, I like it more now than I did at the time. For some reason, I wasn't feeling it, but it's a good tune. Last Night on Earth, love. Gone, love. Miami, you know how I feel. The Playboy Mansion, don't like. If You Wear
Oh, I
That
like
Velvet.
that.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm
like
thinking,
Playboy
no,
Mansion
do
a
I
lot.
like? Yeah,
It's so cool. It's very like Stonesy. Got that
yeah.
Stonesy.
Maybe I could listen back. Maybe I'm confusing with it because as you get
It's
to the end
great.
of the album, I'm trying to hear it
Yeah,
in my mind with the titles. If You Wear That Velvet Dress, I don't think I liked, but I think Please is
not bad,
another
Barry.
good one, right?
People love Please. It's that to me is not one of my top
Yeah.
songs, but the band sounds incredible on it. And yeah, they thought that song was going to be like the Sunday Bloody Sunday. It's got lyrically, they're very similar. They're talking about the troubles in Ireland, and they did see that as kind of a sequel in some ways, I would say, to Sunday Bloody Sunday, or a sister song to Sunday Bloody Sunday.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, half the tracks I like or love, so that's not
Hmm.
bad. And I got to go back and listen
Right.
to it again. I think we got to.
You might be surprised. Yeah, I agree with you that Staring at the Sun was never one of my favorite songs from the album, and still is not one of the ones that stands out to me. But one of the things, the whole album grew on me a lot as I listened to it over this last year. And I certainly think if you're a U2 fan, it's is absolutely worth a second look. If you haven't pulled it out in a while, you might be surprised at how well it holds up.
Yeah, well, what I thought was interesting is my older brother, who was a old school U2 fan, still remember him saying that "Staring at the Sun." That's the one. That's the song I like. He's you know, the rest I don't like, but that was the one that stood out, and so that
Yeah.
kind of spoke to me as like, yeah, okay, that's you know the older generation, the ones who grew up on U2. That was one that connected more so than any of
Hmm.
the others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you after this? We have All That You Can't Leave Behind, How to
Hmm.
Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. So on and so on. So, how do you think pop affected what they would do in the future following this?
Well, I think it affected everything. I think it made them do that 180 back to their old sound and back to their traditional, even the image and the tour and everything in the Elevation tour. All of that was just a complete kind of 180 from where they were. So I think in some ways, what they did in the 2000s was a reaction to pop and to Pop Mart. So I think it had a huge influence. And some say pop as a result was their last great album. I liked the album that I would say it grew on me. I was disappointed to see the pop era and that experimental period end. But that album that they did, All That You Can't Leave Behind, it does, I think, have some great songs on it and is a successful sort of return to the roots and gave them a new life, almost like a third act that they wouldn't have had if they hadn't done that pivot again. So it didn't disappoint me really too much that they did that, but in some ways, pop was certainly the end of an era, and we never saw them try anything like that again. And that to me is too bad because that in some ways was the end of the band as a sort of you know really trying to push the boundaries
Yes,
in
right.
all sorts of ways. You see them do that with their live shows now. I think even the Spear show, the 360 tour, and things like that, trying to sort of push technologically and things like that. But musically and artistically, I don't think that we have seen that side of them again as much. And to me, that's sad. But wow, what an incredible catalog! What a great run! And there's so much to love about U2 and so many great albums and tours and periods. To me, it's like just don't discount this one the way that the band does. It's too bad they're not more fond of it. Have you ever seen them live? I'm
Oh
curious.
yeah, yeah. Saw him on the All That You Can't Leave Behind tour, and
Hmm.
was just blown away, mesmerized by that show and the performance of Gone in that on that tour.
Hmm.
I loved. Yeah, and
Great
then
song.
trying to think, did I see it? No, I haven't seen. That was the one show, only one show that I've seen, and just because the ticket prices were going higher and higher. So, and I think
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember when last time they came here to Connecticut. That's the other thing. I think they really hit now New York and Boston, and but
sure.
what a show! What a
Yes.
show! When they
Yeah.
do bad, you just you know, what can you say, man? I'm a huge YouTube fan. I mean, I just went through that phase too where they could do no wrong. So whatever they did, I'm in. And I was bummed when you start to see like No Line on the Horizon. I was like, great songs on here, but the radio wasn't picking up on it like they used to. That's when you start to see like, oh, okay, things are starting to change now. They're not they're not as mainstream as they once were. But that happens with every band. It is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, they had such a run of being culturally relevant. It's hard to sustain that level of cultural relevance over decades and decades as a band or a musical artist, I think.
Well,
And yeah.
I mean, I think I remember. Let's see, Invisible and Ordinary Love. 2013, I remember Invisible. I think they debuted that during the Super Bowl. It's like, damn, man, these guys still got it. I love that song, Invisible, and the video is so cool. And
White as Snow is to me the real sleeper from their later. White as Snow is like I think it's on No Line on the Horizon. What a beautiful
mm,
song. And it's very like haunting, slow song. But to me, it's like, wow, that's the kind of thing the band can do very well at this period, creatively and artistically. But I have to say, I love Atomic City. I've
I was going to
heard
ask you.
different
That's what I was
things.
going to ask. Yeah, I'm
I
finishing up with
love it.
that. Let's finish it. Yeah, so Atomic City.
I
Yeah.
love it. I think that's the best song U2 has done in years. I love it. I think it's great. And I would not say that because I haven't said this about a U2 song in a very long time, but I thought it was a great song and the perfect song for their Vegas show. To me, the one thing is that I think they used it as the opening song of their encore. To me, that's the opening song of the show. You have to have the confidence to come out with that song and open with it because everybody's gonna like you because it's U2 and it's the opening song, so they're gonna like it anyway. But to me, that whole thing about there's a big one tonight in Vegas and all that, it's like you have to open with that. Like we're here to throw down in Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. We brought it to the Atomic City, and I love that track. And to me, it's like there's an example of wow, they can still put out a song that I can't tell you. That's one of my most spun songs of the last 6 months. And not just because I've been into the band, but just because I think it's the best song they've put out probably in 20 years or something like that. What
Wow.
do you
Yeah.
think of it?
Yeah. Well, here's my thing. When I first heard it, it fell flat. I wasn't feeling it, and then I listened to it again, and now I'm liking it. And I really like there's like a Beach Boys, little Beach Boys tribute there. Like if you hear the harmonies, and it sounds like kind of Pet Sounds Beach Boys moment there.
Sure.
But obviously you got the Blondie,
Call me.
call me, right? And so it's a little
Yeah.
throwback to those, and I
Call
think it's
me.
really cool. And Bono's voice sounds great. And yeah, I'm now a fan of the song. I kept listening to it, and now I'm a fan. And you're right about that. I think it's smart to for the first song to be a newer song that maybe you think you're really confident about because the adrenaline when you're listening when the band opens,
Yes. Right.
I think you're going to connect with a song more so than any other time. So that might help to sell a single better than to maybe play it halfway through because then people are going to be like, okay, time to take a leak. But that
Yeah,
first song,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
To
yeah.
me, that's the opener in Vegas, even though I know they're doing it Achtung Baby and all that. But yeah,
Is
I think
Larry
it's great.
back?
Not
Is Larry Mullen back or no? What's his
not
status?
yet. Yeah, I mean, he made an appearance at the last. I think it was the Las Vegas show. He was on hand to watch the show, waved the Bono gave him a shout out
Okay.
and said that we love you. We can't wait to have you back. So I think he's coming back, or I
But
hope
he's like
so.
head to toe, like recuperating a bunch of
He's had
injuries,
man.
rehab.
Yeah, if you're a drummer, I mean, imagine the physical toll of
Hmm.
drumming over decades or even just a tour. And just imagine for those of us who are, not 20 anymore, like the physical toll of doing that over and over again. You can see why he has to have back surgery, shoulder problems, and all these things. And, even recovering, you come back and putting your body through that night after night. That's really tough. And I think even Pearl Jam recently said, because of Matt Cameron and Eddie Vedder, we can't do the kind of 3 hour shows we used to do anymore. There's just physically those two guys, it takes too much out of them to do that. And so we have to think about ways to do things differently as we're getting older. And I think that's just true for everybody.
Yeah.
But certainly U2. It's amazing that they can still go out and do something like they did at the Sphere and make it. I didn't see those shows, but it sounded like it was a very special show once again.
40 Foot Lemon, the complete story of U2's Pop and PopMart. That is out now. You can find it wherever books are sold, and people can find you online where, Jeff?
Well, there's a page for 40 Foot Lemon and also for the Rain King book, the Counting Crows book on Facebook. So that's a good place to get me. I do actually post stuff there and I do get some giveaways and things like that. So pop on there, throw me a comment. I'll usually respond. And I hope people do love the book. I had so much fun writing it and researching it. I would say that 90% of what is in here is stuff that I didn't know either. And it was a real delight putting it together. And I hope that the U2 fans have a sense of sort of delight in reading it. And then also going back and watching all of the old videos and things like that. I think that there's just a lot to love about the pop era.
Cool. I think I am friends already on your Facebook page for the book, but maybe not. You can send me the link and I'll put it in the show notes so people can go there.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. All right,
Great.
Jeff. Thanks, man. This is awesome. Look
Hey,
forward to having
thank
you
you.
back on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. This is awesome.